A child stands at the edge of the playground. Other children run past, their laughter rising and falling like waves. The air smells of dust and sunlight, and somewhere, a teacher's voice echoes faintly through the noise. But the child doesn't move. They watch the others, the way hands reach for each other, the way names are called, the way belonging seems to happen so easily. And in that small, endless moment, they feel the weight of something no one else seems to notice. They feel unseen. To feel invisible is not the same as being alone. It is to exist inside a world that keeps moving without you, to speak softly and have your words dissolve into the air. It is to realize, too young, that your feelings enter the room but never touch the walls. Invisibility is not the absence of attention. It's the absence of recognition, of being mirrored back as real, worthy, alive. Psychologists sometimes speak of the mirroring phase, that critical stage in childhood when the self begins to form through reflection in another's eyes. When a caregiver meets a child's joy with warmth, their fear with calm, their sadness with care, the child learns that their inner world matters, that they matter. But what happens when that reflection never comes? When the parent is distracted, absent, or emotionally unavailable, not out of cruelty, but out of their own wounds? The child begins to adapt. They shrink, quiet themselves, learn to need less. They develop what Winnicott once called a false self, a way of existing that preserves connection by erasing authenticity. The invisible child is not born invisible. They learn it as survival. To avoid rejection, they fade. To keep peace, they silence themselves. To stay loved, they disappear behind a smile. In many families, this invisibility hides beneath normality. The parents work hard, the house is clean, the grades are good. But emotional neglect isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet in between, the silence after a cry for help that no one answers. The way a parent's gaze drifts elsewhere when the child speaks. The way the child begins to apologize for existing too vividly. Years later, that same child grows into an adult who struggles to feel real. They might be kind, observant, endlessly empathetic, the friend who listens, the partner who understands, the coworker who never complains. They read every room, anticipate every need, and fill every silence except their own. But inside, there's a hollowness. A sense of floating, like being present but not quite in the moment. They might find it hard to assert boundaries, to ask for help, to believe they're worth attention without earning it. Praise feels uncomfortable. Love feels undeserved. And when someone finally looks at them, really looks, it can feel almost painful, like standing too long in direct sunlight after years in the dark. This is the paradox of the invisible child. They spend their lives trying to be seen while fearing what visibility might reveal. They long for connection, yet retreat from it. They crave love, but only the kind that doesn't inconvenience anyone. Because deep down, they still carry the old rule. To be noticed is to risk rejection. From a Jungian lens, invisibility is a shadow adaptation, the repression of one's life force to maintain belonging. Every unspoken word, every swallowed emotion, every unmet need doesn't vanish. It sinks into the unconscious. It becomes the shadow self, the part of us that holds what was forbidden: anger, desire, grief, authenticity. And yet, the shadow is not evil. It's simply the parts of the self that went unfed. To heal, the invisible child must walk toward their own shadow, to reclaim the colors they were told to hide. But this is not easy work. When your identity was built on silence, Speaking feels like breaking a law. When love meant self-erasure, asserting your needs feels like betrayal. And so healing often begins not with a scream, but with a whisper, a quiet acknowledgement. I exist, and my inner world matters. Maybe you see yourself here. Maybe you were that child who watched from the sidelines, waiting for someone to notice the effort it took just to stay quiet. Maybe you learned to read faces before you learned to read words, to comfort others before you ever learned to comfort yourself. Maybe you've spent years blending in, polite, helpful, dependable, yet wondering why the world feels slightly out of reach. If that's you, this is not a story of weakness. It's a story of adaptation, of a brilliant survival strategy that once kept you safe. Your invisibility was never failure. It was ingenuity. You built peace out of silence. You turned emotional neglect into empathy. You made sense of chaos by becoming calm. But the cost of being unseen for too long is that you start to forget the sound of your own voice. You start mistaking peace for absence and love for quiet compliance. You begin to believe that being small is safer than being whole. Healing for the invisible child is not about shouting louder. It's about daring to be real. It begins with the smallest acts of self-recognition, writing a thought down, saying no when you mean no, letting someone see you when you're not composed. Visibility is not performance, it's presence. It's allowing yourself to take up space, physically, emotionally, spiritually, without apologizing for it. It's remembering that you were never meant to be an echo in someone else's story. Sometimes, healing begins when another person offers the mirror you never had. A therapist who listens without judgment. A friend who doesn't look away when you cry. A partner who notices the tremor in your voice and stays. These are not acts of pity. They are acts of reparenting, gentle reminders that your inner world deserves attention. But the most profound mirror you'll ever meet is yourself. The day you look inward and no longer see a void, but a child waiting to be embraced, that is the day invisibility begins to fade. Invisibility dissolves, not through validation from others, but through self-recognition, through the courage to say, I was there, I felt that, and it mattered. To re-inhabit your own story, not as a background character, but as the author. It's not about blaming the past, but understanding it, learning that the parents who couldn't see you were often invisible to themselves. That neglect was not proof of your unworthiness, but a reflection of their blindness. And as you bring compassion to that truth, something shifts. You stop needing to disappear to feel safe. You stop shrinking in rooms that once felt too large. You stop confusing invisibility with peace. Slowly, you begin to live with color again. You speak, and your words carry weight. You feel, and your feelings take shape. You exist, fully, visibly, vulnerably. And in that presence, the world begins to see you. The child who felt invisible never truly vanished. They were simply waiting for your eyes to turn inward. And the moment you see them, not as a ghost of who you were, but as the beginning of who you are, the spell breaks. Because visibility was never about being noticed by others. It was about remembering that you were real all along. To be seen by the world is beautiful, but to be seen by yourself is freedom.